I'm finally getting back to the PAC course, and I want to thank everyone for being patient as I've been traveling a lot. I'm still at home, as you can see. I'm in a different space, but I'll be back in the tower before too long. So today we're going to try to finish up on the sons of Ashtas. And what we haven't covered in respect to the sun is when the sun's being shamed. And it's quite a different thing you're going to notice with the sun being shamed compared to other planets. Other planets being shamed are going to cause a lot of roller coaster effects in people's lives, okay? Where things will go for a while and then fall apart. And they'll have a lot of, let's say, shameful moments, meaning moments where bad things happen that are like shameful, that demean a person, put a person down, or there'll be a series of the shamed person, shaming and putting other people's down as they try to build themselves up, depending on what's going on. But it'll be like a series of events. There'll be multiple events revolving around other shamed planets. When the sun's shamed, you don't see that same thing. What you see with the sun instead is you see this long-term consistency of a shame. It's more of a subtle, long-term, consistent thing. So, for instance, people will get, like I've seen a lot of women who get into relationships, the woman has the shamed sun, and they get into a relationship with a guy who really isn't up to par in major ways, okay? So, for instance, maybe he's an alcoholic and they stay with him for 30 years. So, the shame in regards to the sun is usually a person settles for something that's really not up to what their capabilities are in other ways. So someone who's capable and they're in a job that is really bad and they stay there forever, or in a relationship that has some big imbalances and they're there forever, okay? It's this consistent thing, like they make a commitment, because the sun is a very committable planet. He goes, this is what I'm going to do, commits to it, and now he commits to something that's really shameful in a way, which means the person is somehow being shamed. It's not up to what a person really deserves, what's normal, something like that. And it's just this consistent thing that can keep going for a long, long time. But at least it's not the roller coaster, and through that stability they can build on other parts of their lives better. So you'll see people with shamed suns doing better in life in the context of what they're achieving and doing, and even what they're excited about achieving and doing. But you'll always find there's something in their lives that shows that the person doesn't feel really good about themselves. Otherwise, why did they choose that thing that's really not very good in their lives? That's somehow not even fair in their lives, perhaps, and make that part of their life's plan, because that's what happens. And so it's a shame when the sun is shamed that makes a person accept lesser places in life, let's say, than they would seem to merit based on all their abilities. Okay? Now the sun can be shamed by Mars or Saturn. So if the sun's with Mars or Saturn in the fifth, or if the sun's with Mars or Saturn and with Rahu and Ketu, Rahu or Ketu, one of those two, it's going to be shamed. And as you can imagine, the shame is more difficult when it's sun shamed by Saturn than Mars. Okay? So, when Mars is shaming the sun, first of all, Mars is delighting the sun at the same time. So obviously there's going to be some benefit there. And the benefit is that Mars, the child mind, is saying, we really need this to be okay, and we want to focus on building a kingdom that includes that. And the sun says, okay, let's do it. So they're going to build a kingdom that takes into consideration what people really need. But to a degree, that causes them to adopt some burdens. By burdens I mean limiting situations where they're never going to get ahead, they're going to hold them back or somehow demean them. And by demean means it's just holding on to something that's lesser than your worth or value. Okay? Again, shame planets so easily fall into demeaning or being demeaned. So they accept something that's somehow demeaning. And that becomes a burden because they keep taking care of that demeaning thing maybe. So a job that's beneath them, a person that's beneath them. Now, using that word, a person beneath them or job beneath them, obviously it's not if they're engaged in that. But based on their abilities, what they're capable of doing, how they live their lives, you'll see this big imbalance. Now, that imbalance is there because their shame son is thinking, this is what's right for me. So, with the Mars, the child mind is saying, okay, I need to build a kingdom that takes care of the things that really need to be taken care of so I feel safe, nourished, emotionally and physically. But it takes that to a degree where the parent mind starts thinking, I have to create a kingdom that is so safe and nourishing that it opens the doors to people to enter that kingdom who really are never going to pull their weight. Okay, so the woman who has a husband who never pulls his weight, for instance. I've seen that so much with the Mars shamed sun in women's charts. So they open the doors there, and the woman is creating the kingdom where everyone needs get met, where people are being nourished. But they let people in. They're partnering up with a person who's not doing any of that. Okay? Or they choose a job that doesn't take care of any of that. So it's a really strange dynamic. So they are demeaning themselves in that regards by what they commit to in their lives. They commit to things that aren't helpful for them. Okay? One woman who has this recently told me that, she's been raising so many children in her life. Well, she had one less children than she said, because one of the children she was referring to was her husband. Okay? And it was very true in her life that she did the Mars sun, created the nourishing kingdom for everybody, but didn't have a partner to create the nourishing kingdom. So you'll see these big imbalances between where people are at and the respect they get, basically, when Mars is shaming the sun. Now, with Mars shaming sun, you're going to find these people will oftentimes have a big spiritual focus of some type. Okay? They will be making progress in that area. Of all the shamings going on, the Mars shaming sun is the one that's most inclined to go in a spiritual direction. But you're going to find they're still going to be surrounded by circumstances that are, like I said, very limiting circumstances where they don't seem like they belong in those circumstances based on how they are as a person. But they belong there because that shame sun, there's a part of them that feels like, I'm the one who has to do this thing that kind of sucks. They accept that burden because they feel bad about themselves. They can almost say it's a kind of a shame and a guilt that they're trying to make up for by doing more than their share of the work. Or doing all the work even. And allowing themselves and committing to unfair circumstances. Okay? Long-term circumstances. Now, a lot of times with the shame sun person, Mars shame sun, you'll see a lot of good stuff in their chart, and you'll be seeing that part of life working. And so, the contrast to the thing that where the shame shows up is huge. Okay? And you're like, what? And you are doing this or having this? And it's hard to believe at first. Okay? But it's, again, underneath everything, the person has something that they feel bad about in themselves, that they feel they have to make up for this. And that's literally what's happening. The Mars is shaming the sun. And again, the sun's the parent mind. So the parent mind is shamed. So the parent mind of the sun that's saying, do this, is saying, do this because you have to make up for something, because there's something wrong with you that you have to make up for. To do this, that doesn't just come out of the pure inspiration of the self. It comes out of, I'm feeling bad about this, therefore I will do this. So it's almost like a person is working hard to make up for sin, let's say, a situation in past lives that they very much want to make up for. So they put themselves in these situations. And it really blows me away how long these situations can last. These are oftentimes lifetime situations, not situations of 10 or 20 years, but lifetime situations of commitment that they make to things that don't really work for them. Okay? So, how do we deal with this one, right? Okay. First, it's the least important one to deal with because it's not going to be tearing through a person's life and making none of their lives work the way some shame planets do. You'll see shame planets sometimes just can cause such intense effects that it really disrupts the rest of their life. This one doesn't do it, okay? They'll be able to build a productive life of being, beneficial to themselves and other people, okay? Ultimately, they have to forgive themselves with this one, okay, with the Mars Sun. There's a point they just have to forgive themselves for what they're holding on to, if they can even find it, because lots of times, especially if you have K2 involved in the shaming, so Mars, Sun, and K2, it's so hidden from them why they're even doing these things. The part that feels bad inside themselves is so hidden that they won't really, know maybe. So there needs a lot of introspection to say, just look at the life and say, okay, what are the things in life I'm doing that are not normal? Okay, I've got a job that, I've been committed to that isn't a fair job, a person I'm committed to that's not a fair person. What things do I do to myself that are unusual? Okay, and start analyzing those as symbols to figure out where they're, to try to find the link to how they're feeling about themselves. Because with this Mars Sun shame, it's very easy for a person not to feel the bad things they feel about themselves and instead just adopt frustrating circumstances. So they say, why do I have this frustrating circumstance? What does this show about what I feel about myself? And get absorbed in that and try to get to the feeling of it so they can heal it. Because they need to get into the feeling of how bad they feel about themselves. With all shame planets, it always comes down to that. The person feels really, really, really bad about themselves in some regard, in some way. And then they feel like they have to shine out of that feeling by making something happen, doing something, being something, whatever. And that's all a big compensation. They're trying to make up for feeling bad. Or they have to reduce others to feel better. It's one of those two. It's always about climbing up or climbing down the ladder. And that's never the solution. Like the Tao Te Ching says, whether you climb up the ladder or down the ladder, your position is always unsteady. It's best just to be on the ground. You have both feet on the ground. Now you're solid and stable. A lot of people, shame planets especially, cause a person to always be, putting themselves above someone or below someone. There's always this hierarchy of relationship, above and below. It's almost the only relationships they understand. And with the Sun shaming Mars, you're also going to see these hierarchical relationships, but they're long-term, or one person is the hierarchical forever, or they're the lower forever. With other shame planets, they'll bounce back and forth between up and down, depending if they think they can climb to the top for a moment, they will. Okay? So, with the Mars shame Sun, it's very important to get in touch with that deep feeling of how they feel bad about themselves. What do they feel? What's the feeling? And heal that, to get in touch with it. Get in touch with it, release it, and let it go. Because the inability to be aware and explore that feeling, especially with K2, because K2 can just hide feelings like nothing else, is what causes the person to need something in life that sucks. Okay? And yeah, that's one way they can have something that sucks, burn their karma that way, but in the end it's about getting in touch with the feeling, that the shameful feeling about themselves. With all shame planets, that's always the key. We have to get in touch with the things we feel bad about ourselves if there's a shame planet, and be accepting and loving of that. We have to do that with star planets too. With star planets, there's something we feel bad about ourselves. With agitated planets, with whatever planet, there's always something we have to get in touch with ourselves, a negative feeling we're holding with ourselves, and so the world treats us negatively, right? But with shamed planets, that feeling of, oh, I feel bad about myself is so great, a person doesn't want to go there. And that's also very, very true with the shamed Sun. They don't want to go into that feeling. it's just too painful. The remorse, the pain, the guilt of how they feel about themselves is so great they want to avoid it. One way to avoid it is to commit something that's a constant problem. Okay? I have a constant problem in my life. I can kind of say, I feel bad because of this constant problem. I got a daily excuse of what's not working in my life. This husband of mine, this job of mine, this whatever of mine, this kid I've adopted that causes me endless problems, whatever it is that they've committed to to basically project their negative feelings, how they feel about themselves. So you need to look at the things that are wrong in your life, try to see why you need those, get into touch with the feelings and heal the feelings of remorse, shame, guilt, the really painful feelings that are there. That's ultimately the only way to deal with shame, is to develop a self-acceptance and develop the self-love to forgive ourselves if there's shame. Otherwise, the person is going to be really stuck, and we have to do that with all of our bad avastas, but with shame, it is harder to do than other ones, because simply the I feel bad about myself is strongest in shame. It's not that it's a worse thing. It's just the feeling of how bad one feels about ourselves is greater. Okay, the person is punishing themselves more, basically, with the shame planet than any other planet. Okay. But lots of times you're going to be surprised. Every time I'll say, you're going to be surprised when you see Mars-shamed planets. Like you'll see a person, you'll think, oh, they don't have any shamed planets. You might know them. Then you look like, oh, then it'll be Mars-shamed. Shaming sun, almost every time. Okay? And sometimes you'll see a person, you go, oh, wow, there's something really, really wrong with this person. And you will look at their chart, and they'll have a Mars-shaming sun, and you'll say, oh, wow, they have a Mars-shaming sun, and there's obviously something wrong. No, there's something else going on. Like one chart I looked at recently, yeah, Mars-shaming sun, and this person was really a wacko. This person was going to foreign countries to have sex with children, like going to Thailand and having male prostitutes, watching animal pornography, if you can believe it. Really a twisted guy. And then, of course, we see, oh, Jupiter's also shamed. So that's what was causing that stuff. You're not going to see that kind of, wow, there's something really going on wrong here in the person's life with a sun shaming Mars. Okay? So, but you'll see something wrong in their lives, but you'll be surprised when you see this, okay? So when you see this, realize there's something going on with the person's committing to something long-term because they don't know how to get in touch with the bad feelings they hold within themselves. And they need to find those feelings, get in touch with them, and heal them. And then the thing they're holding on, that long-term commitment that kind of sucks, they can decommit from it and move forward. Okay? Saturn shaming sun is tougher. Okay, because now we have Saturn as an enemy to the sun. And it's saying, don't do the things that you need to build your kingdom. Don't do the things that are right for you. Okay? And the person says, and it's shame. So the sun's like, yeah, it's no problem. I won't do the things that are right for me because I feel so bad. I don't deserve them anyway. So now we get a person who's really, really not giving them to themselves something that a person deserves. Okay? Now, the funny thing about this one is it'll often go into a compensative mode. In fact, I'm going to say it's always going to go into a compensative mode. Sun shaming Saturn, probably amongst all the things I can think of, goes into a hierarchical mode. For all relationships are vertical. It's all about, am I higher or lower than the other person? So, when they're lower than another person, they do these extreme things to show their reverence and devotion to the person. And when they're in a situation above a person, they demean that other person. Okay? I had the pleasure of training in martial arts with somebody who had a Sun, Saturn, Rahu conjunction, okay? And what happened with this for me is that, this will be a little bit of a long story, but it explains this better than any example I can think. when I first met him, Swami had just come to town this person was really into, and he wanted to meet him. So he did this whole ritual before he met the Swami. He did this ancient Indian ritual of bringing some sticks and stuff to the Swami to present himself as a devotee of the Swami. He was like just doing something that would be considered very unusual to make this huge act of devotion and humility to the Swami. The Swami did not really accept him as a disciple. He just kind of smiled sweetly and accepted it, but he didn't do something. But there was this whole act of reverence that no one else seeing the Swami even thought about doing, And usually, you touch their feet. That's it. This guy wanted to show how exalted the Swami was in his consciousness, putting the Swami way up here, Okay. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if it's motivated by a shame, sun, Saturn, Rahu, who's always looking for hierarchical relationships, then it's a bit of a problem. Okay, so then next thing you know, I'm studying with this person, and I trained a lot. I was training very heavily at the time, and so I was the person who was the best to give demonstrations with. And so there was a point we moved to another dojo that I actually built and finished and did all the work on. And we moved in this dojo in a very busy neighborhood. So the whole class, instead of me actually doing my normal training, I was pretty much doing demos with him for people who were like, what do you guys do here? Since I had trained the most, I was able to take the falls, get thrown around the room, have my elbows cracked and broken without getting hurt, but still look really effective because I knew the techniques and I could take the fall basically. So I'm spending 2 hours a day doing demonstrations and getting my ass kicked, not really, but pretending to get my butt kicked, right? And then one time, but I'm like basically learning to hit the ground over and over again. There's one day I took 267 falls, okay? And I thank him for that because that's how saved my life. Okay, the ability to fall has saved my life more than once. So thank him, otherwise I would not be here, trust me. Okay? So then, so then we were doing sword fighting, right? And so I was demoing with the sword with him. So we have these padded bamboo swords. They hurt, but they're not going to kill no one. And, I think he gets a point, then I get a point. Okay, and we played a 2 point, so whoever gets 2 points first. And we just have to hit the person somewhere. So we both know the next point wins. And of course, he's expecting to win because, he always beats me. He's better than me. He's my instructor. I'm just a little low life here. So we're, doing the last sword fight, the last round, let's say. And I'm cutting for his shoulder, and that cut is going to land. He can't, where he is, he can't dodge it. He cannot move out of position. He cannot bring his sword to bear. So what he tries to do real quick is to lean in and cut me. And so he leaned in and hit his face against my sword as I was going for his shoulder. He basically blocked his shoulder with his face. Not a good idea. But the rule is, you can't hit someone in the face. You're not allowed to smack them in the face when we do these practice bouts. That doesn't count. So when he hit my sword with his face, I didn't get a point, according to him. And then he cut my arm. But only after his face got cut open. Like afterwards, So he said, my point, I win, face hits don't count. And I hit him in the lip. So immediately his lip starts swelling. And the worst thing you want to be on earth is a Saturn, Rahu, Sun, shamed martial arts instructor walking around with a fat lip, right? That does not look good. And so, maybe a black guy is worse, but so he has a fat lip. And the reality is, we both knew it was his fault. And the look in his eyes said, wow, you beat me, I can't believe it. But the thing he said was that he had to protect his integrity. He had to show off. He had to be on top. He couldn't let me be the victor for once. And I acknowledge what happened, especially when he's demoed me into some potential new students. So then, as soon as he can, he goes, go get me some arnica. Because, of course, the first thing that erupts in his head, I don't want to walk around with a fat lip. So I jump in my car, I'm mad as hell, and I'm driving down the street to get some arnica for him. And it was very unfair, and so that was him shaming me. I earned that point. I won that point fairly for the first time I beat him, and I should have been congratulated for that, And I think a student being an instructor is not a negative thing. In fact, one of my students recently has asked me about the election, and she did so much work on it. She goes, "What do you think?" I'm like, "I think you got it." I'm like, "Good job." I'm like, "I'm not even going to try now. I think you've done it, and you've worked hard." I mean, they did so many techniques to predict the election, and I was very impressed. I don't need to do it better than her, So a Sun, Rahu, Saturn person, or Sun shamed Saturn person, Saturn shaming Sun person, very much lives in the world of master and servant, king and servant, higher and lower, in a hierarchical world where they have to be at top or they have to put someone on a pedestal. No healthy relationships work that way. Relationships need to be horizontal, where people can mutually respect each other as much as possible, and that's very hard to do for anybody, even a person with no shame planets and a decent chart. That's very hard to do because we grow up with hierarchical relationships where our parents talk to us like we're idiots, where teachers talk to a 5-year-old in a baby voice to show them, "See how stupid you are? I got to talk to you in a baby voice." We should talk to 5-year-olds with an adult voice because they're adults now. They're in the Mercury age, right? All right. After 1, don't Google Gaga your kids. Talk to them as a human does. I remember I've had people say, the best day of my life was the guy who came over. He was a friend of my brother's. I was just 5 years old, and they actually talked to me like a normal person, instead of just talking like a child to them. So we really appreciate horizontal relationships where people are relating on a same plane of humanness. We're all humans. We're all together in this. There's no higher or lower. But the Sun-Saturn shaming Sun, it's all about hierarchical relationships, okay? They feel shamed, they don't feel good about themselves, and they have to prove themselves. A couple years later, we became an astrologer, and I did a reading. The first thing he said to me, before we even started the reading, he goes, "Now you see my chart, you understand, I'm sure you understand why I did some of the things the way I did." So obviously he had grown to a point where he wasn't proud of a lot of the ways he was trying to struggle forward and feel good about himself. So he had recognized that he had some issues, which was wonderful. We were both very young at this time. I was a kid, he was a kid. I was 21. He was super talented, super remarkable martial artist, and he was only a year older than me. He was 22. We were just a bunch of kids beating each other with sticks, learning how to grow up into men. So I was 20. So he was only 21, in his sun maturation. So this little weasel, this dude, me, comes up and hits him in the face and wins. Okay. That was a tough sun maturation, you can imagine. So, that's a joke, by the way. All right. So, with this one, a person feels bad about themselves and has a desperate need to prove to themselves. Okay? They're going to have big visions at some points in life of, I'm going to do this, grand visions. And over life, we're going to have to realize, no, it's not going to be like that. And the thing they need to learn more than anything is humility, and that's only going to come when they accept themselves, when they make the growth to accept themselves. Now, this martial arts instructor is very capable, very competent. He had grandiose ambitions when I was in that dojo with him. And I can see now in his life that he settled for not having any of those mature. He's content and settled. He's made a lot of growth. He had some good things to help him make a lot of growth through this. I'm talking about when he was 21, 22. So I can see he's made growth out of this need. But you'll see when there's this great shame with Sun Saturn, there's a great need to shine, to get away from the bad feelings. Ultimately, a person has to embrace what they hate in themselves, embrace what they detested themselves, and accept and love themselves on a very deep level. We know how hard Sun Saturn is, right? We've talked about it. Now, take that pain to a level of feeling utterly terrible about yourself. That's Saturn shaming Sun, okay? And out of that shame, a person doesn't fulfill all their inspirations, okay? Because Saturn is saying, basically Saturn's saying, don't be what you really are. And the shame goes, you're right, I don't deserve to be the fullness of what I am. So they're struggling to be the fullness of what they really are, while having oftentimes huge ideas to be this great thing, which is not who they are even, okay? And so the solution is the humility to be who they are and to live their inspirations, but not with this, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, not with this grandiose ideas of fantasy. That's never real. But to just get to the place where they know what they are and live that as an inspired life. That when we do the true things that we're truly meant to be, there's no, oh my God, I'm so excited type feeling. It's not that. When we do the things we're really meant to be, and we do the things we really are, it's just calmness and peace. It's just like, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's like, it's like you've seen yourself in the mirror for 1,000,000 times and you go to the mirror, yeah, that's what I look like, no big deal. So even when you first find the thing you're really meant to do, it's who you really are, it's just that casual. It's not like, oh yeah, and I want to do this, it's going to be so amazing. It's like, yeah, it's just so casual. I remember when I was doing astrology, and the day I had my last Uranus on Mercury, which is what got me to become an astrologer, I was reading this book, and it was a book by Stephen Arroyo, and he said, some things that needed to be done in the astrology world. And I just read that, and just this thought came, yeah, I'm here, don't worry. And I just knew it was me. It was just like, yeah, that's me. I'm just that astrologer, the astrologer that's going to do some new things. And it was casual. I didn't get excited about it. I didn't say, hey, Mom, guess what? I didn't call my friend, my girlfriend, and say, guess what? I'm going to be that astrologer. It was just like, yeah. It was just so casual. And that's the beauty of life. The things that we're really meant to do are just so relaxed. They come with peace. If anything that doesn't come with peace, it's got wounds invested in it. Okay? And true things are just a knowingness, a calm knowingness. And I've seen my martial instructor, we're using him as an example, I've seen him grow into this, I can tell he's grown into this more casual knowingness of just being what he is instead of all this grandiosity that he had when he was a young man. And at the time, to balance the tables, to put me and him on a level playing field, because right now it sounds like I'm up here and he's down there. Well, let's tell you the truth. Boy, what was I doing in that dojo? The grandiose, crazy ideas I had that brought me to train martial arts there are absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. I know in my chart what made me be that insane of why I was studying martial arts there. But basically, I was preparing myself to be a one-man save the entire world machine. Okay? And that was my goal. So I was living in a very insane, grandiose period of my life as well. And so it was perfect that we met. We had this tight relationship. We were very tight, and not just in the dojo. We were very, very tight in many, many ways. He was my primary relationship at that time. And the primary relationship we have with someone can have some very scary things in it. And so he was my mirror at that time. I was struggling with a lot of things. And luckily it was a year later that I became an astrologer. And that really, that's not what saved my life, but during my adventures there, training, I had some spiritual experiences that put me in a whole different direction and got me off the mad course I was on when I went to study astrology. All right, now you guys want to know what it is. All right, confession, I'll tell you. So, after I got done bike racing, I got really depressed. I didn't know why at the time, but it was because I had been training so much. And all of a sudden I quit training, so I don't have these endorphins. And I later noticed other friends, when they quit racing bikes, got really depressed. I mean, some even become drug addicts. Because think about it, you're high all the time, major endorphins for all this training, and all of a sudden you cut that drug supply off cold turkey. I was really depressed. And Nothing in the world felt like it had meaning to me. I started getting into studying some occult stuff and Taoism, and I decided just to go back to martial arts. And then that winter, I was working for my mom's second husband, and he was a conspiracy theorist, right? And he would give me all these pamphlets. This was before the internet. You know, these people would print this stuff up on their home Xerox machine and mail it out to their conspiracy buddies. He gave me all these papers about all the horrible stuff the government's do and how corrupt everything is, and he's believing all this stuff. And I'm thinking, you know, and again, I thought the world was real at that time. I thought this was all real. Okay, I thought it was a real world we lived in. Okay, I didn't know better. That we don't live in a real world. I really thought we lived in a real world there. And so, one of the things that would happen during that time, if I would fall asleep, like in the middle of the day, I'd fall asleep and have a nap, I'd wake up to such fear and dread. Like this fear and dread of life ending and death. And I would wake up paralyzed in fear, like shaking like just frightened animal, you know. So I didn't allow myself to have naps. I was working a lot at the time, so sometimes I actually doze off. I got to the point like no naps, no matter what. When I was doing my martial arts training, I was working a lot, I was training a lot, I was helping some people a lot, I was really pushing the envelope on my energy. And I did it on $12 worth of food a week. So I was eating very bad nutrition. No junk food, but just the nutritional quality, the vitamin minerals was very, very low. Peanuts don't have a lot of vitamin C, let's put it that way. And so anyway, I read these conspiracy theory things. I'm like, gosh, if this is true, the only thing to do in the world is to fight this. This is actually happening. But is it true? Just because somebody wrote it down, just because somebody says it, was it true? Was I there? No, I wasn't there. Only people who were there really know what's happening. All this conspiracy fluff floating around, I don't pay attention to it because I wasn't there. So how do I know it's true? So that was my attitude at 20. I'm like, or 19, 20, something like that. I don't know if it's true. Well, I guess I better figure out if it's true. Let's become super martial artists, learn to pick locks, learn to make bombs, learn to do kung fu, learn how to disappear, learn how to climb buildings, learn how to climb trees. You know, the whole James Bond, ninja, plus superhero, all wrapped up into Ernst Baby package, you know. That's what I was going to do. So I found this really cool martial arts. I learned how to pick locks. I went down there and I trained and I trained and I trained. But I'm going to find out the truth about these conspiracy theories all on my own. You have to break into that White House all by myself without a hacker to help me, you know? Wow, what level of craziness is that, right? You guys can unsubscribe, I'll refund your money now. So that was me at 19, 20, right? Looking for purpose after bike racing, you know? So then, I'm training really hard, and then the worst happens. I'm reading a book of a spiritual guru from India. And I fall asleep reading the book. Oh, I hate, I remember if I fall asleep, I'm going to wake up to fear and dread, like paralyzing fear and dread back then. And this time I wake up to music, like just this cosmic music in my consciousness, realizing that, wow, I literally experienced the whole world as music. And I'm like, you know, what am I doing here? None of this is real. It doesn't matter what the government's doing. It don't matter. Because it's not real. None of it matters. This is not what I am. I'm not James Bond. Super Ninja, James Bond is not me. It was just, the whole world is music, and feeling that made me realize that everything I was doing was completely useless. And I just let it go. From that day on, I did not need to be Super Ninja. A short while later, we're in the dojo, and the martial arts instructor said something to one of the people he was giving a demo to. He said, when the student can't learn anything more from the teacher, it's time for him to leave. And I thought, you know, I'm leaving. And I left. And that was the end of my martial arts career at that time in my life. And a year later, I became an astrologer, coolly and calmly. So, that's some fun entertainment for this video. The confessions of how wacko I was, how extreme I was as a child, okay? you can probably attribute that to the Saturn-Mars conjunction in 9th house. That's what I'm going to blame. That's what I blame everything on, okay? That's what I blame everything on my life on. All right. So, the Sun in 8th house probably helps a little bit. So, the Saturn starving Sun is a deep shame of a very low self-esteem. It's this, their core feels bad. They feel bad in the deepest parts of their core. The Sun is your bones, their very foundation. And they'll blame it on things. I grew up in a really bad neighborhood, in a really poor family, and therefore I have to climb upward. You know, there's some, with Saturn Sun, remember Saturn Sun, it's very physically identified. It's very identified in the world. So they'll find a reason why. Oh, because I'm weak, I have a little wiener, I'm small, whatever. It could be anything on a physical plane. Because I grew up with parents that both went to jail. You know, it could be anything like this, that a person grew up in what they felt was shameful or had something to be ashamed about. So they're ashamed at the very foundation of their life somehow. Okay? And they have to grow out of that. Because again, Sun Saturn, it's always blaming things. It always finds a physical, concrete reason for things. It's living very much in the world. Okay? So, when I look at Sun Saturn, most of what Saturn shame and Sun, most of what I talk about is simply the Saturn Sun stuff. The fact that Saturn starving Sun. That's most of what the person needs to hear. Then what you need to understand as an astrologer, as a result of that, this person is always putting themselves below someone or above someone. They're never able to just be next to someone. Okay? And they don't want to be seen in a bad place. It's very, very important to not be seen with a fat lip. I became close with him when one day at 6 a.m. he's knocking on my door. And he says, and I hardly knew him at this time. He knocks on my door, wakes me up at 6 a.m., says, I'm really not doing well, I need someone to talk to. And I can't let my wife see me like this. So he was stressing and falling apart over something. And he couldn't be seen by his wife. He needed a more stranger. I just started there. So all of a sudden I'm his confidant and his supporter and he's basically his advisor in life. So he could feel that I was the kind of person that does that. And that's what I've become, right? In my life. So the fact that he couldn't have his wife see him on a bad day, you know, again, that's this shame Sun. Oh, he's just so desperate to look good in the face of his family, in the face of the community. He got many community mentions in his lifetime, all very well deserved. But these were all important things for him because, again, looking good is so important when we have a Saturn Sun shame. There's a part of that person that, in the youth, is desperately needing to look good to make up for how they feel about themselves and how they feel about where they come from, let's say, their roots, their foundation. And as they get in touch with how they feel bad about themselves, heal it by accepting and loving themselves, then they can be a humble, beautiful person that doesn't need to be up or down the food chain. Okay? So it's just Sun starved by Saturn with the extra of there's this constant need to be looking great. Okay? Looking fantastic. Sun Saturn by itself doesn't have that need. Sun Saturn by itself, they take the humble job. They sit there and they work for 20 years at a job that's not really completely them, that they're not really getting completely rewarded, where they're not getting the raise they're meant to, you know. But when it's shamed, oh, this person has to look good. It's everything to that person at some point in their life until they grow out of it. So that's the additional thing you want to see there. Okay. But like I said, the Sun shamed is very different than other planets shamed. It does not cause the level of roller coaster effects, the level of things exploding in your face that other shamed planets do. With other shamed planets, you're like, what the hell just happened? You know, you get like, stuff happening with shame planets is like, what? You had this happen to you? It's like these shocking stories. With the sun shame, it's not a shocking story. It's just there's something over long term that's just wrong because the person feels bad about themselves. That becomes part of their living reality until they heal the thing they feel bad about themselves. So it's very easy to miss it. With the Saturn shaming sun, yeah, once you start spending time, you see how there's a great need to look great, but still, there's still a consistency. There's not these shocking things. You see some of the crazy things that happen with shamed planets. It's like the craziest things happen when there's shamed planets in fault, okay? But not with the sun shame, so keep that in mind. Thank you.